Have you ever said something and wished you could take back your words? Why did I say that? Well, I have good news for you. My guest, Dr. Felicia Ferrara, has got 5 tips, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that are going to help you so that you never have to regret the things that you've said again. And we're going to meet her right after this. The strongest prison bars are in your head. Leaders and teams, it's time for a jailbreak.
Wow, I love that intro.
Dr. Felicia Ferrara, welcome to Trish TV, the Shift and Lift show.
Yes, I love the name too. Very good. It's appropriate for what we're going to talk about.
It sure is. And I'm really thrilled because Dr. Felicia has, she's just recorded an interview with me, and she seems to think that what I tell people is of value, and hearing that from a professional like herself, it means a lot. So, Felicia, what I'd love to do is for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into what you do. But I want to remind people, if they haven't read the blurb, Felicia helps people with relationships and in the workplace. But one of her jobs that got my attention is that she's actually a legal consultant in the courts for people who have, shall we say, really not done great relationships, and they've ended up in court for it. So this is somebody who knows what she's talking about when it comes to people having difficulties communicating. So you might not be quite that extreme that you end up in court, but what she knows helps with that. How much more is what she's going to say going to be helpful in the workplace and in relationships. So, Felicia, welcome. Tell us a bit about what you've been doing.
Thank you, Trish. Well, it's quite a bit, actually. And things did slow down a little bit with COVID because people weren't getting arrested as frequently. But I have, definitely. Crime was down. People were off the streets. But I think it's starting up again. So I should be real busy pretty soon. But, not to make light of it, it's a very sad comment on society that's what people turn to is crime. And I'm talking about survival crimes of food, stealing food, stealing a $5 package of food and still get arrested. So these are things. I had one young man, and you talk about naivety. He actually stole a credit card. And then he ordered, for about 3 days before they discovered it, he ordered food from a take delivery to his house on the credit card. So you know they were going to find that. And the poor kid, I mean, and I'm not he didn't look like he really had any idea of how bad what he did was done. He had 2 handicapped parents, and so I suspect that finances were kind of bad at the house, but that's what he wanted. He wanted food. So you see, it's not all immersed in crime of people that are heartless. And I might see someone like that, and I might see somebody on the other extreme that did a capital offense and possibly hurt quite a few people. So the spectrum of things that I see, I'd say about 70% of them involve drugs. So that's a very much detriment. And I've seen young ladies come in beautiful at 17, 18, looking great, and they got in trouble because of a boyfriend. And I see her 7 years later, and you could tell she did methadone or methamphetamine, excuse me. And the teeth are all rotted, and she looks about 45 years old. A beautiful girl. Wow. And it breaks my heart because I have children, and I do have a kind of maternal instinct, and it just makes me cringe, when I see that destruction. So drugs is definitely a detriment to the crime. But, it is interesting, but I've been working with kids. I started in juvenile detention centers back in the early 70s. That's how old I am. So up in Long Lane Reformatory up in Connecticut, Middletown, Connecticut. And I saw the kids that what they went through, how they kind of suffered it being on the inside. And of course, in those days, you would go for 2 years if you had a nickel bag of marijuana, of cannabis. Now it's going to be legal in most states. So now it's not considered a crime. But those young men, yeah.
Sorry, 2 years.
2 years in reformatory. Chances are they might have had a few other arrests as well. But what they go through in those reformatories is a whole nother story. So I
reform.
No, not at all.
Perhaps reforms them into something that wasn't intended.
Exactly. And you know, they have done studies where they take that same $30,000 a year or whatever they spend on that kid being arrested. If they put that in a private school and sent him to get cultured or get educated, you know, what a difference that would have made in their lives. Definitely made a big difference. So our system is kind of
punitive,
very punitive. Yeah, so that kind of breaks my heart. But pardon my cat; he seems to want to jump in my picture here.
That's all right. Hello, Puss.
It's my little Romeo. Oh. But here he is. Let's just say hi. So
hello.
He's very huggy. He's a very cuddly cat. But anyways, we'll leave him to the rest. But so what I see throughout jail a lot is the domestic violence, and as part of a forensic work, we sometimes do custody evaluations and divorce evaluations. So if a couple is getting divorced, there's children involved, there's usually a custody evaluation to see which parent or what that child's special needs are that they might need that one parent can provide versus another, or how they can mutually co-parent. So it gets very hairy because let's face it, when you talk about your kids, there's nothing more passionate to people than their children. So it gets very intense. And in working with these couples, I've come to see how misunderstood, the misperceptions they have of each other. They might have been married 10 years, 15 years, but no concept of how that other party is struggling to keep up or to fulfill the dreams that the other one had, even though it may be broken or forlorn. But and I'll give you an example. For instance, one couple that I was working with, the husband had to fill out some paperwork and he couldn't do it. And I read his file and he had medical issues why he had like a slight paresis in one of his hands and he couldn't write as fast as she would have wanted him to. And you know, the wife just came over like a bulldog and stood over him and said, "What's the matter with you? Hurry up and write that paper." And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. It's not a matter of choice. It's not that he had the choice to fill out that paperwork quicker. So these are things that I observe really quickly because I'm used to working with them. But as a lay person who's married to the person, they just see him being sluggish. They don't know that they don't realize that what impact that disability has on them. So that's the frustration that gets to me and why I want to do work like with relate this to, where I can help couples learn another way of looking at each other's nuances. Let's say foibles. You know, we all have flaws. None of us do everything right. And so how tolerant are you of the person who doesn't do everything right? And so those are reasons I want to do the relate this to.
Wow, that's you've just told us a whole lot right there of being aware of the other person's
right,
perhaps disabilities or skill and so on, and
well,
you seem to, oh my goodness, yeah, that was
another example is like, for instance, when there's a loss in the family, God forbid you lose a child. One parent may be a talker and need to vent and talk and talk and talk. And the other parent may need to be an internal thinker and walk away and maybe go walk on the beach and be quiet and process what happened all alone. So you have two opposites trying to cope with a very devastating thing, the loss of a child. And then that's how it becomes heated. And the one who's quiet thinks the other one is being too aggressive and bothering them. And the one who's wants to talk thinks the other one doesn't care, and they don't want to talk about it. So you try to modulate the differences between the two and bring it to their attention. And I like to call, you call it therapy, I like to call it reality check. Get a reality check. Is your perception realistic or is it not? And, some people can accept that term better than if you say, I want you to go for therapy. Because, therapy is still like, no, let's not do therapy. But I can have a conversation with you and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. And so you kind of work through that. I've had other couples that the wife was obsessive cleaning and she claimed he was dirty. Well, he might leave his socks or he might leave something around, but the minute he put it down, she would be right behind him picking it up. So their whole marital life, she wouldn't do things on the weekend because she wants to clean the whole house and scrub it. So there has to be a medium,
Yeah, it really does. And things like that can go back to when we have an intolerance, like say we're obsessively cleaning.
Right.
That can go back to our conditioning as a young person and as a child, can't it? And that's sort of something that you can help people with. So
yeah, absolutely. And very often it starts there. And I've personally known people, even in my own family, I might take a drink in one sip and I'll put the full glass down and the party will pick it up and go wash it. And I mean, that's how fast, that's how obsessive they are with anything being, disrupted. And, you do what we call a desensitization kind of training. You take tasks one by one and let it go undone for a day and see if you can get through that. And then you try to keep doing, you work down a hierarchy of what is more stressful than the other. But yeah, we have the compulsions to do those things. So not only that, though, basically all of us communicate differently. We might use words that are harsher than others. And I can do that at times when I'm tired. But the thing is to understand what the person really meant. And it's hard when you're at the heat of it with your spouse, your partner. It's very hard to say, oh, what did he mean by that? You're not going to stop and think. You're going to say, what? You just called me what? Lazy? And then, of course, the fight ensues. You think I'm lazy? How about you? And so, that's usually the way it goes.
It just is. Oh, goodness me. That's it's so true. And this brings me to our promise at the top of the show, that in those fights, people can often say things that they regret, and afterwards they think, oh my goodness, why did I say that? How can I best not do that again? And I love what you've started with people being able to understand another person's style.
Yes.
But you've got 5 tips that are even more specific than that people can do in the moment just before they open their trap and trap themselves. So please go ahead and this is so great. I just love this.
Sure, I'll cite them. It is very hard for people to learn to do this on their own. It takes conditioning. But the first thing, of course, you want to do is stop. And before you open your mouth, stop and think. And in that heat of the moment, when a person triggered you, said a trigger word that you don't like, it's very hard to stop back and think. But if you stop and think, you step back, take a deep breath, and they say in all the stress classes, if you're stressed, take, 10 deep breaths and stop. But by all means, don't play into the argument. For instance, a lot of people argue because that's the only way they learn how to communicate. And in their minds, they're interacting, so it's okay to argue. But so you want to stop and think, you want to take deep breaths, you want to actually, as they say in the lessons, count to 10, learn to count to 10 in your mind. And if it's really heated and you're really afraid you're going to lose control, just leave the premise. Go out back, go out the door, do not stay in the room where a fight's going to break out. Because I'll tell you, domestic violence charges are very prevalent today. And I actually had a young lady at one of the halls that got arrested for throwing, believe it or not, you're not going to believe this, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich at her boyfriend. Peanut butter and jelly. And the crust of the bread hit him in the eye.
Oh.
And he made charges. He wanted her arrested. And the girl actually went to jail. Now, granted, she may have been very heated at the time of the argument, but if you think about it, it really sounds ridiculous. and anything is considered a weapon. If you throw a can of soda, that can is considered a weapon.
Well, it could do some damage, yeah.
So the average person in that heat of the argument, if they don't know enough to stop and pull back, tip number one is to stop and think, of course, take the deep breaths, count to 10, and then I say leave the premise, leave the area. But the other one is, before you have the fight with the person, you want to write down in a journal, what you're feeling at that moment. And it's almost guaranteed, if you look at those same words tomorrow morning, you're going to be glad you didn't say them.
Wow, that's really...
Yeah, it's really...
Number two, count to 10?
Count to 10, yes. Count
get out of there.
Famous one. Get out of there. Get out. Men are always going to lose when it comes to domestic violence. 9 out of 10 times the men are going to get arrested. So I say get out as fast as you can and cool off. That's the point of leaving. Cool off. I don't say go down to the bar and get drunk. I'm saying just go outside your house and get away from that person at that moment. So, yeah.
That's really good. And I know with my husband, he not when he's feeling like that we have that very often, but one of his outlets is that he will run. He loves to run, and that gets his frustrations out. And he'll swim, and he has to do something physical to release. It's his way of it's staying fit, but it's also part of his mental health routine. So I think it's very helpful that not only they get out of there, but if they're feeling aggro, maybe if they can, hit a boxing bag or do something physical to release.
And that's a healthy way to handle tension. Yes, it's very healthy. And I'll be honest with you, even myself, I'll be on the computer for hours, and then all of a sudden I can't take it anymore, and you're pent up. I do the same thing. I'll run to the pool. I have to go swim. So you have to let that excess adrenaline leave, because if it builds up in the middle of your kitchen, somebody's going to get hurt. Somebody's going to say things they never meant to say. And it's really hard to take them back once they're said. It kind of sears in memory.
It does. And, we've had lockdown. We've had COVID. Well, some places are still in the midst of it and needing to shut down. I know in Australia, and I expect it will be the same in America, that the domestic violence would go up, especially because one of the essential services is apparently alcohol. So we could, all through the pandemic, we were able to buy alcohol. So I imagine that the combination of being stuck at home, unable to get out, and alcohol and a fight, what can they do if they, what can people do if they can't get out of the house, or at least maybe they can go in the yard perhaps, but what can they do if they're feeling that and they're in lockdown, Felicia?
They can definitely run around the house, etc. But where the problem comes in is where the partner chases them. The partner doesn't let them go. So you have a man, let's just, for example, the man pulling away, trying to not get into a physical argument, trying to get away. And the wife, I told you. And the wife is chasing him. There's a breaking point that we all have. We all have it. So if she then becomes the aggressor. She's attacking him. But if he swings, just moves his arm and hits her, that's considered domestic violence. So you can't push her away. I mean, you just can't. So my goal relate this to is to show people the differences in communication, to cool down. What happens, let's say you have an ongoing problem. Let's say it's 6 months going by. Let's use an example that you have a teenager that you don't agree on how you should discipline this teenager. And of course, we all know teenagers get in trouble again and again and again because they make bad choices sometimes. Both of you are arguing. So you start a little bit, you start more. What happens over time, a few weeks of that, a month of that, the two of you, your tensions are so high and your cup is so full of tension that you've got nothing left to cool down. And that's what the problem is. It's like your cup runs over with tension. And that's when people get hurt.
Wow.
Now, that's assuming both people come in with a fairly average persona. Now, take cases where we have handicapped people, we have disabled people. That's a whole nother set of pressures. handling them needs to be taught as well, because for instance, you will have like an autistic child has a fit quite often, and somebody has to handle that correctly, not to hurt the child. So that also needs to be taught. So we have people in a household that are not capable of learning, say, these 5 tips. They're not capable of somebody in there has to take the realistic stand. And like you said about self-care before, I think we were talking earlier, self-care, very important. If you're the caretaker of somebody who has a severe handicap or illness, whatever it is, you have to take care of yourself first. It's kind of like the sinking ship, or when the airplane's going to go down, they tell you to put the parent's air mask on first and then tend to the child. The same thing at home. Make sure you're keeping yourself in good standing and not becoming so frail that you might act out on the person who's more disabled. So
Right. And I would imagine that the associations that that serve varying types of disability would have resources, and I would encourage anybody to reach out to the associations that are there, because they do have experts, they do have resources, they have websites that can be of help. Because I know that some people may be afraid to reach out to certain types of authorities because they may fear that children will be taken away from them.
Exactly. And I've had people make anonymous calls to my office and say, I'm very angry. I'm afraid I might hurt my child. And I have to talk them down into, and they'll say, I'm afraid to call the domestic violence center because they'll come and get me, or they'll trace my phone number or something. And I have to do a lot of talking and counseling right there on the phone. But today, if a person needs a community resource in across the United States, you can dial 211 and it gets you to your local courthouse, and they have a list of community resources they can refer you to. In the olden days, we used to have phone books. Remember the phone books where we used to have a whole list of community agencies right in the front? So you don't have that anymore. And I think all families are afraid of calling the police or authorities because that means somebody's going to get arrested. So, yeah.
Well, that's right. And with anger issues in Australia, and you probably have them in America, you can tell me. In Australia, we have a thing called men's sheds. And they're, what it is it's a gathering that men can go to. They call it a men's shed. It's like where men can get together and just support one another and be encouraging. And just that they can be themselves and share and get that support. As if there's a bunch of mates in a back shed. You might have something similar that's maybe called something different in America, but and a lot of men won't talk about their feelings, but they might not get into a deep conversation, but just being with other fellas and just saying as much as they can say that they feel comfortable with, that there are people who understand, because they need to socialize and process their feelings, just as women do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know we have men's group, but I don't think they're called men's shed, but we do have men's groups. Men do talk. The younger generations are more congeal. And I can say this because I'll be honest, when I had my children and they were small, there was no way my husband was going to change a diaper. And there was no way he was going to get caught pushing a stroller. I don't think he ever did once. I don't ever remember him doing that. And that I'm going back quite a while. But nowadays, the fathers are very capable of taking care. They've come around, they cook, they clean, they wash dishes sometimes if you're lucky. They take turns cooking, But so the differences between male, female has changed a little bit. But there's always those other outliers that contribute. And if you talk to any domestic violence counselor, 70% of all fights involve alcohol. Alcohol is very aggressive. It makes person very aggressive. And so it can be as extreme in any other kind of drug, anything that's like spice. I don't know if you probably have it in Australia, spice, or they call it K2 over here. It's synthetic cannabis.
Right.
And that
anything really that alters your mood can
absolutely.
Yeah. And look, in the time we have, I want to make sure that I share your website.
Okay.
So let's have a look here. This is, and I've had the URL going across the bottom, FeliciaFerrara.com. That's two R's in the middle. If you're listening to the podcast, it's Felicia, Felicia, Ferrara.com.
Correct.
And I will have the link in the details at the bottom. Unless you're on LinkedIn, then you'll have to. Well, you can go to Felicia's profile page.
Yeah.
So you have got you're a relationship coach, relationships do's and don'ts, and this is her website here. Felicia also does speaking, I believe.
Yes. Speaking.
And you give classes, and so this is not just about couples. You can actually help with in the workplace with helping people.
In the workplace as well, because yes, these issues usually pour over into the career and work path. So yes, I work with a lot of and high end. The higher functioning a person is, the harder it is to realize there's a flaw. So when you're higher functioning, you don't think there's anything wrong with you because you're already superseded most people at what you do. And then all of a sudden becomes, what do you call it, the beckoning, where it's like, there really is a problem.
Oh, so you think I can't possibly be the problem because I'm so smart and I'm so high up, and then that's when and actually some of those people can be very hard to deal with because they can even be, if they don't want to change, and that's how they control people, and they're gaslighting and manipulative. You find that some of those people that they won't listen to you, or they just tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. And you see a lot of them on, a lot of them are on that TV programs like Snapped and all of that. I mean, there are people out there that are hurting pretty badly and maybe be under the control of somebody who's that manipulative and maybe smarter than them. So that's a whole nother topic we could get into about the imbalancement of intellectual ability. But anyone who's out there and needs help, please make a phone call before something happens.
Before it gets too late. And remember Felicia's 5 steps before you lose your cool, before you open your mouth. So we they were the ones which is stop and think. Take a breath.
Take a deep breath. Count to 10. Makes a big difference. Rearrange your leave the house or run around the house, whatever you need to do. And then the other one is to journal your thoughts on that topic before you speak them.
Journal your thoughts, because then you can come back around to it. My goodness, Felicia, this has been so wonderful. It's been great to talk with you. And look, these things, they get away from us. When the cool calm of day, we don't think about being that way. But when things and the holiday season is coming up, where families get together and there's tension, soften, and just sort of remember to pull back and remember Felicia's 5 steps and get professional help, either from Felicia or from in your country, wherever you're watching this. And you can Google resources and so on. So thank you so much, Felicia. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
It was my pleasure.
It's just
quite a wise woman yourself. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
I like to think you walk in the light. And I often say that at the end of a lot of my topics. It's like, may you always walk in the light.
Thank you so much.
That's beautiful.
We will close with that, and we will see you all next time. Oh, and remember to like, subscribe, and make a comment, because I always come back to these and check on them and answer your comments. So see you next time.
Thank you, and good night.